Good evening and morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining. I appreciate you taking time today to make sure that you understand the importance of cybersecurity. For those whose first time joining, my name is Fletus. I've been in the industry just shy of 20 years, and I love jumping on here and bantering with you. As you will see, I briefly showed a topic I'm going to talk about just a little bit around human centric security and tabletops. So you got a teaser. But for now, I just want to banter with you for a couple minutes before I jump into that topic. Since the last time I've been on here, I have experienced a few things inside of my career. The first, like many people in the market right now, I was hit with a reduction in force. I have actively been shopping, interviewing, and chatting with CISOs, CTOs, CIOs since the beginning of May looking for my next opportunity. But before we have a pity party, it's been a great opportunity to spend the last 2 months with friends and family. During that time, I've been able to self reflect and realize that it's been about 20 years since I woke up and had a job to go to. Some may say, why is that a good thing? Well, the good thing about that is I've been able to self reflect and focus on some other priorities in my life. Those priorities include my wife and kids, my friends, my support group, and the extended community in which I live in. Since that time, I've had the opportunity to have a few public speaking engagements where I've given back on the knowledge that I've obtained. The first is I've done a few podcasts where I've talked about the impacts of a reduction in force. I've talked about human centric security. I've talked about GRC, which we're going to talk about later in this banter. And I've talked about the importance of cyber defense and security engineering. So, the purpose of tonight's banter, as it's now July 2nd, is let's think about the importance of many different disciplines. Some of us have only focused on offensive, while some of us have been inside of the defensive side, security operations. Other security architecture, security engineering, and additionally the governance, risk, and compliance arm. Each of these disciplines allows your organization to be profitable, to be a market indicator or differentiator. So let's talk about the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about GRC. As if those who know me, I've been doing cyber defense / security operations since 2008. So that means I've seen a few different things. I've worked across many different sectors. Some of those sectors are financial, regulated utilities, software development, as well as consulting with other firms and different lines of businesses and industries. One common denominator that I've realized in the last 10 years is the importance of a strong governance, risk, and compliance organization. The first thing that comes to mind in GRC is audit. I've been an auditor. There's importance to understanding end-to-end processes and complexities. There's also importance of getting past the manual monotonies of documenting findings in a spreadsheet and relying on macros, VLOOKUPs, and other formulas to make sure that you're tracking appropriately. Some organizations may still need to do things manually by tracking outside of GRC platforms, while large organizations may have a dedicated ServiceNow or IT service management plugin that allows you to do governance, risk, and compliance tracking with Archer, Sprinto, ServiceNow, to name a few. But some organizations don't. Additionally, we'll talk about the importance of focusing on you and I. If you're like me, many organizations do tabletop exercises. They do audits. But when you do your tabletop and audit, you're likely auditing process and technology. What I'd like to challenge you with here in a few minutes is auditing the human. the employee, and thinking about why it's important to get their perspective, their point of view, to make sure that your incident response plan and BCP, business continuity plan, are appropriately defined, architected, and tested. And first, let's start our banter tonight by talking about governance, risk, and compliance. The first thing I want you guys to think about, excuse me, wrong slide, is we need to think about something a colleague of mine, AJ Young, has said. GRC professionals are becoming endangered. As you can see in his LinkedIn post here, it's not because the work's not important, but because the work is evolving and you and I, as practitioners or GRC, are not evolving with it. As he points out here, auditors can't speak cloud. They can't speak AI. They can't speak machine learning. They don't understand your application keys, your APIs. And additionally, they do not understand automation. As he alluded in the next to last sentence here, it says he's not trying to scare people, but he's saying we need to focus on improving. So if you're an IT auditor, governance, risk, and compliance, security awareness professional, how are you upskilling yourself? Are you looking at Python classes, R, AWS, Azure, GCP classes? Are you taking certifications that talk about CI/CD, so continuous integration and continuous deployment or delivery? Do you understand how to use security automation to ensure that your job is not manual? As I talked about early in this presentation, it's easy to use Excel as your platform. Excel is one of the largest security tools outside of a browser that we use today. We extract data into Excel. We parse it using comma delimited values into CSVs. We add VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, formulas to parse data and track it, which is all appropriate 5-10 years ago. But we also need to think about how we can use reactive techniques or proactive techniques such as alerting and triggers and automation to ensure that when something has a configuration drift, we spin up a process to automatically fix it. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're logging and tracking data that doesn't rely on you and I to manually update a cell inside of a spreadsheet or, an access database that you've manually located, that you've hosted either on your laptop, a shared drive, or even that you're tracking and publishing somewhere else. Yes, this dates me of people using Access. But it's important that we log data, that we capture data, and we set up automation to fix things. So as AJ points out here, GRC is important. We need governance, risk, and compliance analysts. But instead of just an analyst, we need GRC engineers. We need GRC analysts / engineers who understand cloud, who understand what a command line interface looks like, how to run specific commands and commandlets to get information from Azure, AWS, or GCP. Additionally, we need GRC individuals and professionals to be able to understand how to use pull requests or to write Terraform or Formation, Python, PowerShell, Bash scripts to collect evidence. Additionally, we need to ensure that they're technical. This is where tactical GRC comes into play. We're going to talk about another tactical GRC component here in a moment, but let's continue talking about the standard auditing process. So you've been challenged to collect your SOC 2 Type 2 evidence. So that means you're going out and collecting your controls from, let's just pick on AWS for the purpose of this example. So you want to make sure you have configuration set on your EC2s. your compute, your servers. How do you do that? Do you ask the sysadmin, the developer, the site reliability engineer to pull the config, to manually open the GUI, the graphical user interface, and take a screenshot? Or can you just ask them to add your account to the proper group for you to go in and run specific commands to capture this data yourself, which allows you to free up the SRE, the sysadmin, the cloud engineer who has to do this. So, Fletus, you're saying I should give a GRC permission rights and prod. Maybe. If we educate and train our GRC engineers, then yes. There's still a separation of duty, but it's called a just-in-time permission. You're giving them the ability to run these outputs, collect the data, and then meet with the SRE, the cloud engineer, or the sysadmin to validate that they collected it correctly. This allows separation of duties to be in place, thus allowing your auditors, your governance, risk, and compliance to speak the language of your SRE, your cloud engineer, your IT ad, or even your security engineer. As more and more data is left on-prem, it's now SaaS, software as a service. It's now sitting natively in a cloud platform. And it's also sitting in places that we no longer own. This is why GRC and governance, risk, and compliance needs to focus on third-party risk management, supply chain attacks, and understand how to properly secure and handle data that's no longer in the physical four walls of your data center because you're relying on third-party vendors to host your data. This is where a proper risk appetite, risk register comes into play so that you can document exactly what you're doing. Which leads me into my next topic, where we should talk about human-centric tabletops. We need to think about what that would look like to do a tabletop that focuses on the human over. Sorry, I shared the wrong screen for a second. The human over just doing incident response. This is a recent workshop I put together for Continuum Con, which is what I previewed in the previous slide before I flipped over to this. It's important when we build tabletops that we don't just test our incident response plans, our IRP, or that we test our standard operating procedures, SOPs, that our security operations team, our analysts, and our incident response individuals are working. Where it's important here is we should think about building a human-centric tabletop so that we can demonstrate the importance of simulating real-world scenarios that highlight the interplay between technology, you and I as humans, and the security team. Giving you a little behind the curtain, I built a scenario where I talked about green tech having the ability to develop a revolutionary product. In this, they've developed a home automation system called EcoHome. EcoHome is designed to make homes more energy efficient and provide users with remote control and monitoring capabilities. However, their product has gained vast popularity, which they start to notice a large security incidents, including unauthorized attempts and potential data breaches. So for the purpose of this tabletop, we're going to introduce the scenario which I talked about you, and we're going to assign roles. You can take this interplay and then apply it back to your organization. In the first round, you're going to talk about how your incident response team responds to the cyber incidents, which they make decisions about how to mitigate the risk, i.e. they're implementing new technical controls, or they're conducting security awareness training. The next part is using human factor experts, your security awareness team, your human risk management, to analyze human behavior as well as the psychological factors that may have contributed to security incidents. Next, you would pull in your engineers, your security engineers, and ask them to design and implement technical controls that would help them prevent and or detect the security incident. Each of the players on the tabletop would discuss and debate, which is important, how the effectiveness of their decisions, considering both the technical controls and the human centric perspective. So, I've mentioned human centric a couple times already. Let's define human centric. Human centric is the psychological value that you and I bring to an organization. You and I have learned valuable lessons from the time of birth until now. No matter if you've worked in the industry for 1 day or 40 years, you bring experience, diversity, and clarity to your job. You and I have intellect that we've either learned from formal training, school, certifications, training process, the school of hard knocks. We've touched a hot stove. We've tripped over our shoelaces. We've opened the front door and been burglarized. Or we've been taught real world examples by friends, colleagues, and peers, either in the workplace or at home. Each of these examples, give us an opportunity to be able to use our emotions as well as our intellect to make decisions. So that's what I'm meaning here when I say getting the human centric perspective. You and I, no matter, again, as I said, if we've been on the job 1 day or 40 years, have lived life. We have different perspectives. If this is our second career moving into cybersecurity, if we got a 4-year degree and came into cybersecurity, or we transferred in from a non-traditional role, such as a school teacher, car mechanic, pool cleaner, to name a few, into the field. So we all bring perspectives from our previous jobs, from our educations, and from our upbringing, in which we can provide real world analysis and expertise to these discussions. So, for the purpose of this discussion, we're talking about a human centric tabletop. First, I already apologize. I should have defined a tabletop. Some of you may have never participated in a tabletop. A tabletop is a scheduled exercise where generally your security, I team, and maybe executive/legal come together to test a specific scenario. This could be ransomware, a business email compromise, a supply chain attack, to name a few. During the scenario, you have a facilitator who injects the first alert, the first phone call, and you play out the event from the time that you get the help desk call to the first alert coming to your security operations center, to your IT team seeing availability issues. And then there's injects. During a tabletop, you'll have an inject that describes more information, another event, another incident, another alert, which allows you to build out the scenario to allow you to make informed decisions and to test the incident response plan, known as your IRP, and to test your security operations team's standard operating procedures and or playbooks. So let's get back to the human-centric side. I've already alluded to the fact that we're talking about a company who builds home automation systems for more efficient playbooks. We've already talked a little bit about the scenario. We've already engaged our incident response team. We've engaged our GRC, our security awareness folks. We've engaged our security engineers, our IT sysadmins. So next, we're going to walk through what roles you would assign. So in our incident response team, this is generally going to be 3, 4, 5 players, depending on the size of your organization, who will respond to the first alert, the security incident, while making decisions to mitigate the risk. Your human factor experts, I say 2 to 3, could be 0 to 1, depending on the size of your organization, who will be analyzing what you and I think and do as part of our job, thinking about the psychological factors that comes along with us making decisions as a standard user. So I want to play that out a little bit. You and I, likely, if you're a security person like myself, have added security to our title. But I'd like to challenge you that security is everyone's job. And what I mean by that is it's now 2025 at the time of this recording, and you and I have to apply security from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep. So, Fletus, what do you mean by that statement? Let's talk about a few things. If you're like myself, I wake up between 5 and 6 a.m. Eastern Time every day. I may or may not get up, get dressed before I pick up my first technological device, which is likely going to be my smartphone. Let's say, for example, that I have multi-factor authentication set up for a key system at work. That multi-factor system is configured to send me a push notification. So it's a yes/no prompt. The adversary has learned my schedule through either reconnaissance, an insider, or someone else, and knows that I wake up early. So what they did is they looked at a breach notification, they looked at a pay spin, or they social engineered the organization's first name, last name, permissions, and tried some passwords or found my password because, for example, I reused a personal password from a data breach for my corporate account. So they logged in with my first dot last at company and put the password from the data breach. Bingo, it was the correct password. So at 5:05 a.m., I get a push notification to my phone. Well, my alarm just went off at 5 o'clock. I rolled over and I'm trying to hit snooze. But instead of hitting snooze, I hit yes on that push notification and then rolled back over. What did I just do? I just granted the adversary, the threat actor, access to that account. But what I did is I rolled back over. So, did that just hit home with you? Because it hit home with me. I'll give you a real world example before we go back into this. Here in the US, we're going into the 4th of July week. About 2 years ago, I allowed my son to FaceTime with his grandmother. I was upstairs doing a quick alert, and I logged into my account from my corporate device, went over to look at my phone and realized I did not have it, but all of a sudden I was logged in. My son was on the phone with his grandmother, my mother, and immediately just said yes to the prompt to get it out of his way so that he can continue the conversation with his grandmother. I got into my account. It was a legitimate request for me to log in. But let's think about that differently. Instead of me legitimately logging in from my workstation upstairs in my home office, I was at the grill, flipping burgers, grilling steaks, making hot dogs. My son's still on the phone, but an adversary replayed the same attack I talked about at 5:05 a.m. But instead, this time he did it on a holiday, expecting that I would have allowed my phone to be used by one of my children. I would not know that my son or daughter said yes until it was too late. Luckily for me, I get notifications on my smartwatch. So what I would have likely seen it, been able to pause, depending on if I was in conversation, and go ask my son or daughter, why did the prompt come in? What did you do? Some users might not have that certification or that notification, onto a smart device. And it could be minutes, hours, or even a day before they realize that they had inadvertently gave access to a critical account. So think about that the next time. I'm not trying to use fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, but just think about, are you using something as simple as a push notification? If you are, ask your IT security teams to see if you can go to a challenge response, where you have to put in the number that's on your screen into the device to get authentication. So you don't have to worry about an inadvertent MFA attack or MFA fatigue, as we've talked about in previous talks. And you've probably heard in the news where the adversary just continues to push the notification to you until you finally either inadvertently or just get tired of it and say yes. So let's keep walking through our scenario here. We've talked about some of the technical, we've talked about some of the engineers. Now let's talk about our first scenario of the attack. This is the insider threat. For the point of this workshop, the new employee, John, is hired. He has access to sensitive Echo home data. Initially, he seems like a great addition to the team. But as time passes, his behavior becomes suspicious. So, my question to you: how would you handle an insider threat? Do you have a process and procedure, both internal to IT security as well as your human resources, that outlines what you would do? What human factors might have contributed to John's actions? For example, I've already talked about we have intellect, but we have emotions. John may have had an emotional trigger in his life. This could be the death of a pet, family member, or loved one. This could be a marital status change, such as getting divorced. This could be a medical diagnosis, such as a chronic disease, that's caused him to change his normal behavior. Or additionally, this could be a positive thing. John just won the lottery. John just inherited money. John just had the ability through a gift to no longer need to work. So he may have decided, I don't care anymore. I'm rich, or I don't care anymore. I'm dying, and made a harsh decision. Again, this comes back to emotions, which could lead to suspicious behavior. So let's play this out a little bit more before we jump into the next one. How would you handle the insider risk? First, I hope you have logging and capabilities. 2, have your HR or people team contact them or reach out to the hiring manager or the actual HR manager and have him or her do passive reconnaissance with John. Hey, John, how are you doing? Anything changed in your life? What are you focusing on? Do you need any help? Which leads into the next question here is what human factors contributed? I've already shared. We have emotions. Something drastic happened, either positive or negative. By learning and being involved in your employees' lives, colleagues as I call them, you can help understand what would cause behavioral changes inside your organization. These are not easy to catch with tools because your tools are only looking for ones and zeros, the light to be on or the light to be off. Where a proactive leader, knowing what's going on with his or her employees, can help catch potential, disgruntled employees. We want gruntled employees, those who love their job, want to be at their job, happy to be at their job. But as I alluded, emotions come into play and it's easy to become disgruntled. Disgruntled employees stop caring. This could be, again, as I said, drastic actions in their life, a positive or negative. It could also be that employee who's retired in place. They're coasting. They no longer care. They click on every phishing email, both testing and real. They flippantly share their passwords in plain text by writing them down, typing them in places, storing them on plain text files on their desktop. This is bad behavior. This is behavior that can be caught by your security awareness team, your governance, risk, and compliance, or even the HR manager by having regular one-on-ones, skip levels, and conversations with his or her team. Let's go to our next one here. This is the phishing attack. We've all dealt with these, or have dealt with these, or will deal with these inside of our organization. This could be an adversary who sends a phishing email to our users. So in this case, EcoHome users, attempting to steal their login credits. As an IT security person, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for known TTPs, tactic technical procedures, to block this attack. But that's using technology. That's using a gateway, an edge device such as a firewall or proxy, and or looking for content filters to stop the phishing attack. When the user or employee clicks on the malicious link that spoofs the page and does credential harvesting, I'm hoping to catch those with my email gateway, who's doing URL rewrites, with my firewall, who prevents the access to a new domain, or a geo block because the domain is no longer hosted in the country in which you do business. But those may fail, which leads us into our second question. What human factors might contribute to the success of the attack? I alluded to a few in the previous one. Some others could be you've set too high expectations. You've told me, Fletus, that I need you to get priority 1, 2, and 3 completed by lunch today. But what you did is you also scheduled 4 hours of meetings with me today. So do the math. Most employees come in between 7 to 9 a.m. If I just said I have 4 hours of meetings and I have more than one priority that's due by lunch, I have a conflict of interest. I either have to skip the task, skip the meeting, or be distracted during the meeting when I'm working on the task, which all leads to multitasking errors. I'm going to get careless. I'm going to not complete the task to my best ability, or I'm going to complete the task by making shortcuts. I'm not going to follow process and procedure. I'm not going to validate everything that I'm doing because I have a time constraint and my boss has asked me to complete something in an unrealistic time frame. So I'm going to click on the phishing email. I'm going to answer the social engineering call. I'm going to fall receptive to a drive-by attack that sends me a pop-up. And I'm training myself to just click yes. And I've given access, shared data, or allowed a remote execution or rootkit to be installed. At this point, you're relying on technology again. I'm hoping I have a strong endpoint protection and response tool that can stop the download or protect the execution. But from a human point of view, we need to understand that humans are emotional. I've alluded, Fletus has 4 hours worth of tasks to do and has 4 hours worth of meeting. That doesn't compute. So I'm going to take shortcuts. I'm going to be receptive to these attacks. I'm going to give in. I'm going to take shortcuts, which is going to lead a potential for my organization to miss something, either from a tool failing or the process failing, in which I've taught you during your onboarding training, your annual training, or the micro learnings that's coming from your GRC and or security awareness team. So let's talk about the next hijack, the social engineering attempt. Sarah has been your colleague for many years, but something new has happened. Something in life, Sarah has changed. Sarah has been one who's been reserved. She doesn't talk about personal matters at work. But now, Sarah has gone rogue. Sarah is now asking John, Fletus, Bob, Sally, Sky, Kay, Cage to help reveal sensitive information. This goes back to a least privilege. Sarah may not have the rights to see the data, but Kay, Sky, or Cage does. So now Sarah's going to start asking her colleagues to do what's called collusion. She's either going to convince them through monetary means, bribery, blackmail, to share this information with her. This is manipulation. This is how information is leaked. Because if your organization is doing discretionary, everyone may have the same rights. They're doing role-based access, they still may have the same. But if it's discrete or mandatory, where it's required that you have approval and a certain need to know, this may be why she's having to manipulate her colleagues. So my question to you is, how do you handle social engineering attempts? Does your help desk or service desk know how to spot them? Does your finance team understand the process to make an ACH change? Does your talent team understand the standard size of a resume? and what indicators to look for when they open it? Do your employees understand what a block screen looks like from your proxy, your EPP, your endpoint protection, or your firewall, if you disclose those to the employees? All of these are education materials that will help your employees understand how to respond. If you train your employees on the color schemes, the, the alerting, the verbiage, they're more than likely not going to fall for a spoofed AV drive-by attack or pop-up because you've educated them on what a block looks like from your security and IT team. You're also teaching them how to do validation. In today's world, we used to say trust but verify. Now we need to verify, then trust. Have you taught your finance team how to verify that this is the legitimate customer who's asking for a routing change or a payment to be cut? Or that this is actually the controller or CFO asking for a payment to be made out of band, outside of the standard process of multiple approvals, or following internal validation called checks and balances. This is where the human factor comes into play. Do your employees know the process? Do they understand what steps they have to take? Is there a checklist that they can mark off to make sure they do not miss a step, which could inadvertently allow a social engineering attack to be successful? Thus, it's important to train your finance team, your talent team, your accounts payable, and your service desk, help desk, on how to do verification before trusting. So we've talked about a couple scenarios already. So I want to pause for a second and let you think about what changes you would like to make already from this brief introduction to our workshop. Okay, so you've reflected. I want to give you a few takeaways. Human-centric security is not just about technology. It's about understanding you and I's human behavior and the psychological elements that comes with that so that we can design and implement effective security solutions. Additionally, technical controls alone are not sufficient to ensure security. You and I play a critical role in compromising and or strengthening our security organization. Thus, a holistic approach to security will consider both technical and human factors when it comes to preventing and responding to incidents. So some tips for you. When you go to implement this, use real-world examples or case studies to make scenarios more relatable and engaging. So for example, if you're a financial institution, talk about big misrouting changes where millions of dollars were inadvertently given away. If you're a research and development team who focuses a lot on patent pending or patent work, talk about the integrity and confidentiality of your data. Make sure that only the appropriate individuals can access it. And if you're an e-commerce or a company that relies on consumer purchasing or even enterprise purchasing, that your website and data is available so that you have the ability to focus on how profitable your company can be versus having to respond to data breaches, unavailability, or other things that can cause downtime in your organization. I list here in the second one. Incorporate injects such as a data breach or a malware attack to challenge your employees further. Consider adding time-sensitive or scoring system to increase the tension and competition among the players. So a time restraint could be that your organization can only be down for 1 hour before your if you're manufacturing before your machines start backing up. Or you can only lose 15 minutes worth of data before recovery is no longer possible if you have a high volume data processing. The scoring could be the low, high, medium, critical, and what the risk that means to your organization. Use tabletops as a way to challenge as a starting point. It allows for discussion, both technical and human centric. For the purpose of this tabletop, you're trying to get your marketing team, your finance team, your talent acquisition, your sales team, and other non technical organizations to start thinking how they would respond, how they would react to a security event. This will give you insight on what to change inside of your training, your onboarding, as well as your reoccurring micro learnings that you provide to your organization. This will also give insight to your security operation, your SOC and IR team on gaps inside of your organization, controls that they can tighten, content that they can write, hunts they need to do in their environment after facilitating a human centric tabletop. As the data that you glean from your standard non technical users, in the sense that they're not IT or security professionals, will allow your IT team and cybersecurity folks to understand what additional controls, logging, detection, and response that they need to implement to allow a timely and effective detection and response. By participating in these challenges, you gain a deeper understanding on how your business operates day to day. You glean what your employees think, how they think, and you develop skills that allows both your employees, your colleagues inside the business, as well as your security team to effectively respond to real world scenarios. So at this time, I would like to move into some Q&A for those who've been here. We may not have a ton of questions, but I would like the opportunity for those who are sitting here to ask a question. If you don't have it now, you can reach out to me via the comments. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Blue Sky or X to ask a question. But what I would like you to get out of this call, as we've talked about two important things so far tonight in our banter, is GRC analysts need to be GRC engineers. He and she need to think about how to upskill to have capabilities in AI, machine learning, cloud, and not just comfortable with making checkboxes or pushing stale content to their employees because they don't understand how their employees do their job, which is what our second topic was, is using a human-centric tabletop to learn and glean from all employees in your organization. Every employee in your organization adds value. There's value proposition from employee 1 to employee N. No matter what department they work in, no matter how long they've been on the job, they bring life experiences, intellect, and knowledge that allows your organization to grow and prosper and be effective. So interview your employees, get to know them, do roadshows, do human-centric tabletops, enable your governance, risk, and compliance analysts to become engineers, where they can learn Python, R, automation, CI/CD pipelines to do their work, where they can have proactive responses to controls failing versus manual responses. As I shared earlier, a quote and a post from a colleague of mine, AJ Yan, who has recently published a book on GRC engineering. As always, I appreciate all of your time. I appreciate each and every one of you taking some time out of your evening to join my cyber banter. I hope you found some value in this. If you did, please like and subscribe. If not, reach out to me. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know how I can help you be able to effectively communicate this information to your peers, to your colleagues, to your leadership team and executives. As no matter where you're at in the workforce, you matter. That's what I'd like to leave you with as we wrap up this cyber banter this evening. You are important to your organization, no matter if you're an associate, junior analyst, or a C level executive. You have value, you add value, and you ultimately allow your business to be more effective because you have human centric security. Again, as I alluded to earlier, security starts from the time we wake up until we lay our head on the pillow and close our eyes. We are inundated with notifications all day long. Even myself, as a seasoned security professional, I have and will fall for a phishing attempt, a social engineering attempt, but I know how to respond to them. I know when I see something to say something. I know to let my teams know if it's at the workforce, in the work site, corporately. If it's at home and personally, I share with my loved ones. That wasn't me. I clicked on something. I gave something. We need to reset our accounts. We need to watch our bank account. We need to do X. We need to implement Y. We need to remediate with Z. So, as always, as I conclude many of my talks, stay safe and stay secure, everyone. I appreciate your time and hope you can join me again for another cyber banter. Please check out my Food for Thought series as well as my weekly Sipping on Cybersecurity Saturday morning podcast. Until next time, stay safe and stay secure, everyone.